Row crop farmers, farmland owners, and beginning farmers are increasingly curious about soil health. Integrating grazing ruminants ramps up soil health, and the feed value of cover crops can often offset the added cost of planting them. Livestock can also utilize a small grain in rotation or perennials planted on more marginal row crop fields. This video is one in a series through the Minnesota Institute for Sustainable Agriculture's Endowed Chair in Agricultural Systems. Jim and Lisa Erdahl grow corn and soybeans in the Blue Earth River watershed in southern Minnesota. J.A.'s Farms now includes the fifth generation with daughter Katie and husband Matt Alford, along with their two children. Lisa and Katie run the office or drive equipment and both work off the farm in healthcare. Average yields of corn and soybeans are consistently good on their 1,320 acres. Since the 1970s, land stewardship has become essential to their system. Considering impacts on the community and future generations is also a strong value. Matt explains their farming system, why they adopted soil building practices along with observed benefits, and how they are thinking about diversifying the corn and soybean rotation by integrating grazing cattle.
So this is corn stalks left over after corn harvest that we've just recently strip tilled, and we're incorporating fertilizer in our strips while we're doing tillage in a 7 to 8 inch band, and leaving the old corn stalks, the old corn rows, in the middle of the row totally undisturbed. So we're combining a fertilizer pass along with a tillage pass and minimizing the amount of disturbance we're doing while doing it. So we've tried a little bit of everything. These corn stalks, you can't see a lot. There's some green puffs here and there, but these were all interseeded. At the same time, we side dressed our nitrogen when the corn was approximately V4 to V5 growth stage. So we did that on all our corn acres this year. We've been doing that 3 years now, and it's worked for the most part pretty good, depending on the timing the weather has allowed us to get in the field. We've had pretty good luck with cereal rye ahead of soybeans and no tilling into that cereal rye in the spring, and that provides phenomenal weed suppression. Those have kind of been our main two go-tos that we've done. I'm encouraged that there's green out here right now. That means it survived the corn canopy, and there's some annual rye and some cereal rye here. More than likely the majority of the annual rye will winter kill. It's been about a 50-50 the last few years, but there is a fair amount of cereal rye that survived the corn canopy as well, and that should be here come spring, and we'll let that grow as long as possible before we terminate it. And we'll plant soybeans directly into that and then terminate it after we plant.
What led you to adopt the soil health practices of reduced tillage and cover crops? Are you seeing benefits, and do you think about further diversifying your rotation?
That was not maybe the main goal of getting into it, but we started to see some things of a lot less water standing. We saw better water infiltration. We've seen better our nitrogen efficiencies. The amount of fertilizer we've had to use has gone down since we've done some of those things. Weed pressure, weed control has improved as well. So we've seen a lot of side benefits. So in 13, we had some farms that part of the farm got prevented plant and then part of it was not. And where we prevented plant, we planted a diverse cover crop cocktail mixture that got big and nice and big, and had a chance to sequester and pull up a lot of nutrients. And the following year, right to the line, I believe there was a 30 bushel difference in the corn the following year. We had a small 30 acre patch that was prevented plant last year, and we did the same thing. We did a little tile work, but then we leveled it off, planted a diverse cover crop mixture at the end of July, I believe, and it was the same story. It was about 20, haven't totally analyzed the data, but the yield monitor is right to the line, dark green. There's at least a 20 bushel advantage to where that diverse full season cover crop mixture was. Still looking at diversifying our rotation to allow for a longer growing season and to get more GDUs ahead of our cover crop so we get more bang for our bucks.
You've been talking with fellow farmers who are integrating grazing. Why are you thinking about grazing cattle, and how could that work with a diverse rotation?
Well, I think one of the main reasons would be to allow for some flexibility outside of the corn soybean system, because I get very frustrated, especially like the last few years with low commodity prices, and basically feeling like we're trapped. We got corn, we got soybeans, and if prices are low, you still have corn and soybeans. Maybe some small grain, but if you have a ruminant or a grazing herd, you could it would almost pencil out better to plant an annual crop and graze that and move them, and you could almost plant 2 annual crops and use that to graze and sell meat basically off that acre and be more profitable when the corn and soybeans commodity prices are lower. So it'd give a lot of more flexibility than we have now, is one of the reasons. Could take the small grain off and then plant a forage crop, a sedan or a grazing crop of some sort.
You and Katie helped your family in Nebraska operate a high production feedlot system. How are you thinking about grazing in relation to a confined feedlot system?
I would prefer to have the animals out of confinement and on the ground as much as possible. I realize with some of our northern winters that's not totally a reality, and it's going to be weather dependent. A fall like this, cows could have been on corn stalks for 3 months, and that's huge as far as your pencil book, having to feed hay and all that good stuff, and the health and everything. So that would be ideal. And again, if you had opportunities within the growing season, after a small grain or other things, there's other grazing opportunities to have the animals out of confinement and have them out on the ground. But you have to look at a more diverse rotation than just corn and soybeans to get to that. If there was a large enough of a premium for grass-fed, grass-finished type of cattle, because again, going to more of an annual grazing system with annual crops, your sedans, you graze a cereal rye in the spring and then come back with that type of thing. You could probably grow and finish cattle on some annual forages like that and maybe get some premiums. I'm not sure how large of a market there is for that or how hard that's get into, but that would be a potential. You could find some niche markets by having cattle grazing, growing them on the ground instead of in confinement. For us, the thing that would make the most sense to at least to get started would be to just custom graze, probably cows. If there was a producer within the 50-100 mile radius who was looking to graze corn stalks, especially corn stalks with cover crops growing underneath of them, I think would be really good in a fall like this. That would be ideal for our operation at this time, with no infrastructure to handle or treat cattle at the time, or pasture as well for a cow-calf type of operation. So initially that's what I would like to start with, is to bring in and graze corn stalks.
What obstacles would you have to overcome to graze cattle, and have you found willing cattle producers nearby?
Fence would be one thing, but I know there's cost share available to put in fence, because throughout Jim's career he tore all the fences out, because and now people are starting to put them back in. With some of my friends are starting to put fence back in. So that's a small obstacle. Some of it's maybe just mental. It's an added workload of making sure they're in and keeping water to them and unfrozen stuff, but those are small issues. Probably the biggest thing is finding the livestock themselves locally, because I have yet to find a lot in the area. I don't know, I've been on the grazing exchange and there wasn't much on there as far as within the 30-mile radius. I have talked to a friend back in Nebraska who considered it, trucking them out here, but I haven't gone as far as on my end to putting any fence in or yet anything, so that hasn't been realized yet. But I think there are options if I wanted to look hard enough. It's just depending if I want to commit to it or not, basically.
What do other family members think about grazing cattle?
I think Jim would be on board, and I think there's a benefit to having cattle back on the land. There's some concern with whether it's real or not with compaction with cattle and things, and there is probably a little bit on the cattle trails and stuff. Growing up, I've seen that, but I think the benefits would outweigh the negatives of that, and so that may be a kind of a mental barrier. And maybe the one other thing would be that anytime you have something with a mouth, you're kind of married to it. So there's always a daily chore. So there might be a little bit of a hurdle there, but if I can make it, if it's an economic benefit, I think then all that stuff goes to the wayside a little bit. So.